Are you a property owner considering to put your property into long-term rentals? Are you looking at exploring the option of getting a single large sum of money at the beginning of the year and then being able to kick back and relax while your tenant pays you throughout the year? I might have some shocking news for you here in 2025 that might be worth considering. Stay tuned and listen to more secrets about how you can make better investment decisions here at the Bali Business Review with me on Market Insights. All right, so my name is Jing, and I'm the CEO of Bukit Vista. And just to be upfront, I probably do have, of course, a stated interest in getting more short-term rentals. That is the business of our business at Bukit Vista. However, I'm speaking plainly in my efforts to create a more sustainable and economically beneficial marketplace for all investors in Bali. So I'm doing this long-term, not just for the benefit of my own business and my own company. So, why am I uniquely qualified to speak about long-term rentals? How about this? I founded my business based on an enormous influx of long-term rentals that emerged around 2010. I'll tell you the story of how that happened. So one day, I was working at Amman, and my wife calls me. She tells me that, hey, Honey Bunny, that's her nickname for me, I've got a car load of guests who want to lease a property for about 3 months. So having worked as a real estate agent before, I took out my phone. This was a Nokia phone at the time. And I went down the contact list and I said, call these owners, ask to then get permission from their helpers and housekeepers who are always living on site. They'll open up the doors for you. Your guests will be able to inspect the property. And if they like it, ask them to submit an offer. And the owner might consider, instead of selling the property, to rent the property out long term. So she said, okay. And then she went about and showed these passengers in a car this sequence of properties in our portfolio. Now, I didn't think much of it at the time, but that moment would be pivotal to the founding of our company. Why? Because just in about 3 hours later, they made an offer. They made an offer that was almost double what the market rate was. And I was astounded. I said, who are these people? And she told me that they were Norwegian students. And I thought, what? That makes no sense. I've never seen that demographic before. What are Norwegian students doing, renting out luxurious villas for 3 months of the year? Turns out, and here's a great story, the next day, another batch came, but this time in 3 cars. And then the next day after, 6 cars. Next day after, 12 cars. So an entire school of Norwegian students in Jimbaran were making an exodus out of the, school-provided accommodations at their hotel on Jimbaran Beach, and they were looking for an alternative. And so the budget that they carried with them was the same budget, but when they pulled together, they had a lot of money. So one by one, we rented out up to about 15 to 20 villas, even a few hotels, and that got Bukit Vista started. So I am very appreciative of how long-term rentals can be very desirable and also very, what would the right word be? Profitable? But the sad story is that within 2 years, this entire market got so competitive, got so unregulated that it broke to the point where the school itself was regulated and asked to remove themselves from Bali because the Norwegian government hadn't been funding the students to stay in Bali, and they didn't think it was very appropriate for the students to spend government money on villa housing and partying in Kuta and jumping off from roofs into swimming pools. So anyhow, that market ended rather very quickly due to a lack of correct management. All right, so now it brings us to 2025, where I'll talk about some of the factors that everybody has been watching and why a long-term rental might not be such a great idea. So here's where it begins. When we look at long-term rentals, we need to examine who our customers are going to be. And so for the majority of the customers can fall into a few categories. The first, and this is a broad term of the customer, is called the digital nomad. When you unpack that word digital nomad, you start seeing that there are sub-tribes in that large tribe. So within the space of digital nomad, what you're speaking about is a person who can earn a high income without having to work in a industrial city. They can work in Bali or on the internet, and they can do so while maintaining, let's say, a high income source that will be able to pay for a luxury property or pay your rent that you're hoping to gain from their tenancy. So let's break down this digital nomad into different categories, and you can see more clearly what is happening. I would say the first category and the most entry point category is not going to be the type of person that will spend a lot of money for an accommodation. This is what I call the solo remote entrepreneur. Okay, so I have friends like this. I've been in this job before too myself, so I'll give a little bit more insight on what the solo remote entrepreneur is. So the solo remote entrepreneur is usually a 1 or max 2 person company. What do? They offer a service or I don't know if it's called service, but they're a 1 person business, a 1 or 2 person business, and this is how they go about it. So one of the common occupations of a solo entrepreneur is to do digital marketing online or drop shipping or some other business that they can manage by stitching together a bunch of services on the internet and also connecting their clients on the internet. So I'll give you an example, a very good example of a guest who was a solo remote entrepreneur. This was a couple, and they were fairly wealthy, and they stayed almost a month in one of our resorts in Bali back in 2000, and this is before COVID, so this is about 2019. Okay, so it was an Italian couple, and what they had done was brilliant. They had found a way to manufacture sunglasses without having to start an office, go through the process of hiring employees, and then building a factory. So this is how they started the process. They went onto a platform website to look for an artist that could design the actual sunglasses. And then once the design had been published, they used some clever photo editing and video editing skills to go on Kickstarter to get funding for their new project. After they had secured the funding, then they released the design drawings to a contract manufacturer, which they again found in China, and they ranked and looked through the platform, found a contract manufacturer, paid the funds that they had raised on the Kickstarter to this Chinese manufacturer. The Chinese manufacturer produced and palletized the shipment, which they then gave to a logistics manager. It was called Flexport, that then brought the entire pallets of sunglasses to the Amazon FBA, fulfillment by Amazon. And Amazon received 6 pallets of these sunglasses, put it into their warehouses, and started distributing them all across the US, North America, and the world. So this person was able to make around $8,000 to $10,000 a month at least from selling sunglasses that they had made without having to go and hire a team, build a factory, pay for logistics, and set up their own distribution. They were stitching together service after service that they had coordinated on the internet to become a solo entrepreneur. They were successful, and of course they need to keep on inventing new styles, new brands, and one of their primary responsibilities was to go on social media, advertise, create content, and Bali was a great location for them to exercise this type of background to gain attractiveness to their lifestyle brand. So that's one example of a solo entrepreneur. So this person at different levels has different budgets. If they're just getting started out, they're probably not going to pay a lot for their accommodation. They're going to pay much more into their business. Of course, they're just getting started. Once this solo entrepreneur is, let's say, a little bit more established, a little bit more successful, then they might splurge a little bit and spend a bit more on their accommodations and then become a good customer. But this type of category of entrepreneur is increasingly more and more competitive, and the main reason is because of things like YouTube. YouTube is spilling out the secrets of how to do this, such as myself, and more people are embarking on this process, which increases the competition, lowers the margins, and also then makes the disposable income that somebody would have to engage in renting expensive properties a little bit less likely. They're going to be spending more now on competing on marketing. They're going to be spending more on competing on getting, let's say, also with tariffs and global trade being so tumultuous these days, it's not so simple to organize a logistics coordination like the way I described back in 2019. So this type of tranche is probably going to be shrinking over time. So you're not going to be getting as many solo entrepreneurs with large amounts of disposable income to spend on accommodations. So this category is probably a declining trend. Let's go to the next category. The next category of digital nomad was never a digital nomad, but they liked the sexy title because they were remote workers. What is a remote worker? A remote worker has a job at an established technology company or any company that allows for remote work. They might not be an entrepreneur. They are probably doing something like systems admin or computer security, or they're a software developer, or they're a project manager. They're in Zoom calls all day, they're on Trello boards, they're on Slack channels, they're using Discord, and they are coordinating and managing teams, but remotely. They're paid a salary, and yes, these people would tend to have one of the most stable, most generous budgets that they could afford to spend on a long-term lease. And during the 2020s, right after COVID, up until about 2024, this was a very large segment of some of the lease takers in the Bali rental marketplace. So that part was fairly good and fairly stable. Okay. So this marketplace, as you can imagine, this tranche of customers is only seeing decline over the next few years as more companies are asking all their workers to not work remotely, but return back to the office. You can see this policy being rolled out everywhere across the world. Remote work as a category has not done very well in terms of good business culture. So people goofing off at work or not even working at all, keeping their cameras off. So this type of remote worker is also seeing a decline in the total amount that they would be going to Bali and perhaps spending on accommodations as well. So you're seeing a decline in this market as well. All right, let's go into our last category. Our last category is not a digital nomad at all. This person I would call is just the regular executive. So this is a person who has a upper level managerial position in either their own business or a large enough business where their presence and their whereabouts are not critical for, let's say, their work. These are decision makers. These are the shot callers. These are the big bosses. So this type of category is not tied to any location for doing their business. They can be in Bali, they can be in Tahiti, they can be in the Maldives, they can be in Switzerland. This type of person travels everywhere a year, has a global footprint. In the 80s, they would be using a cell phone. In the 90s, they would be using an iPhone. And now in 2020, they are probably using a Zoom call or even AI to get their job done. This category expanded massively during the 2020s after the Ukraine-Russian invasion. We saw a lot of money and a lot of residents pour out from Russia and accumulate in Bali. And for the most part, partially digital refugees, I could call them, but these were generally executives and people from upper management positions, and they could command financial capital. They could work globally and not have, let's say, a geography impact their lifestyle or way of doing business. But this category also is seeing decline. Of course, now the situation in Russia is much more deterministic, and so a lot of Russians have left Bali in search of, once again, greener pastures in Thailand, or have simply gone back home because the outcome of the war is much more certain now. Other factors that we're seeing more and more of these, let's say executives choose different locations throughout the year. They're not going to commit to a long-term rental just in Bali when there's a great ski season in the winter in Aspen, or there's a party and carnival that they want to attend in Brazil, or some other season of the year where they want to make choices about where their location is going to be. So this type of traveler is also not going to stay put. So by analyzing each major tranche of potential long-term guests, I'm forced to ask the conclusion or reach a conclusion of whether or not there is a strong marketplace for long-term leases. Now, this is where I need to reach out and ask the community whether or not they see anything that I haven't seen. So if you watch my video and you've found a new tranche of customer that I haven't mentioned, or you're able to successfully still lease out your properties to people who are willing to pay 6 months or 12 months up front, please let me know. But otherwise, I'm going to stay committed to this idea that the decline of the long-term rental guest is inevitable and it probably will not pick up. And if you're looking to gain investment value out of your property, you should consider other options. All right, signing off again, this is Jing with Market Insights here on the Bali Business Review, reporting as, once again, here in California. Goodbye.